Dr. Brian, welcome to the podcast. It's really lovely to be able to speak with you again.
Oh, thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
So our topic today is around the microbiome, leaky guts, this concept of LPS or lipopolysaccharides, and we'll talk about fermented foods and the role that they can play here as well. Before we dive into that, just in case there are some listeners who aren't yet familiar with you or your work, are you happy just to do a little bit of an intro and a background to you professionally?
Well, I've been doing this for 40 years, and my passion is to carry out a message by which people are empowered in the right way to get healthier. That we all are trained by the mass media to look for a better pill when we have a complaint. And I refer to that as like a dog chasing its tail, that you can take some medication that will help with your fatigue or with your headaches or with your joint pain. And it may help temporarily, or your high cholesterol or your high blood pressure, and it may help temporarily. And it's really important to get your blood pressure under control, but that's not going to fix the problem. And that mechanism that's causing the problem, if it's not addressed, is going to rear its ugly head somewhere else down the road. So you may no longer have high blood pressure, but you get dementia. If that mechanism that was affecting your kidneys and your blood vessels, creating the high blood pressure situation, if that mechanism also creates inflammation in your brain. So that you may settle down the tight blood vessels that require medication to relax a little bit, but if you still have the mechanism going on, you're going to get dementia or some other complaint. So my goal is that people understand. When I moved from Chicago in 2010 to San Diego, California, I drove across country. I drove my car across. It was a wonderful drive. But I needed a map that you don't just head west from Chicago and expect to hit the city of San Diego, right? You need a map. What highways to take, where do you turn? Oh, there's a detour, I have to go around and get back on the highway again. Whatever, that's what happens if you've developed inflammation and some type of disease. You're off track, and you need a map to get back on track, to get to no inflammation. You need a map. Well, tell me what pill to take to get my blood pressure down. No, because you're gonna have more problems. Of course, we'll get your blood pressure down as quickly as we can with nutraceuticals, pharmaceuticals, diet, of course, but that's not going to fix the mechanism that caused the blood pressure. So my goal is that people understand they need a map. And when you realize you need a map, it's overwhelming of all the roads that are in between Chicago and San Diego. It's completely overwhelming. Which road do I take? Well, what's this thing about plastic storage containers for food in the refrigerator? What do you mean my nail polish may be causing inflammation in my brain? What do you mean that the flame retardant chemicals in my bed sheets that I'm breathing, I don't smell those chemicals, but I'm breathing them every night and they cause inflammation in my brain? What are you talking about? I mean, the list goes on and on and on. There's so much information that we all need to be exposed to. That's why in my most recent book, that's #1 in 7 categories on Amazon for brain function, the subtitle is just 1 hour a week to the best memory, productivity, and sleep you've ever had. That's not a cutesy subtitle. It's the only way to be successful, is that every Tuesday night after dinner, you tell your family, this next hour, I'm studying about how we're going to be healthier. Or every Sunday after services, whenever it is, but every week, you learn one more thing and you realize, oh, glass storage containers instead of plastic storage containers. And you go to the 3 URLs in my book and you go online and you look at glass storage. Oh, I like those. And you order 3 round ones and 2 square ones and 1 for the pies, and you pay with your credit card, hit send, you're done. It took an hour. You're done for the week. But never again are you going to poison your family with minute amounts of poisons that accumulate in your body. They're called phthalates from the plastic storage containers. You put leftover dinner in a plastic storage container, put it in the refrigerator, the next day that chicken's got phthalates in it from the storage container. So you order the glass ones, you're done for the week. Next Tuesday night, you're going to learn about nail polish. Next Tuesday night, you're going to learn about toxins and indoor air pollution compared to outdoor air pollution. And so you're going to, all right, I guess we're only going to run the dishwasher when everyone's asleep and no one's in the kitchen, because that's generating a lot of toxic fumes that we're all breathing, because it's not airtight, it's watertight, but it's not airtight. And the high temperature of the water with those toxic chemicals in the dishwashing detergent creates gases that are poisonous to your brain. And so it's overwhelming, but every week you spend 1 hour, just 1 hour. And in 6 months, boom, you got this. You've changed the lifestyle for you and your family without making yourself crazy. So that's my primary message. And the message today that we're talking about is the most important what to do of all the messaging that I can possibly give.
Okay.
So that's my introduction.
Thank you. It's an interesting way, but a beautiful way to introduce this, I think. And as you say, I think today's conversation is, I guess in some ways, expanding on the map from a gut perspective specifically.
That's
so
exactly right.
Exploring some of that terrain. So with that in mind, when we think about digestive health, a lot of our community listening are going to potentially have had diagnoses like IBS. They've been given this label, maybe they've been given some peppermint oil capsules, but it's the same story you've just given, which is they've been given this one thing, maybe a couple of things to manage a symptom, but they're not really getting the help in understanding what's contributing to those symptoms that have been clustered together and given this label. Yes. So with that in mind, I guess I'm just going to throw the ball into your court, if that's okay, Dr. O'Brien. And where do you think a good place to start with this conversation is?
That's a really good question. And it's just the best way to start. So if you've been given a diagnosis of IBS, what does that mean? What does IBS stand for?
Irritable bowel syndrome.
Right. It means your bowels are irritated. That's not a diagnosis. That's an observation. Well, you've got IBS. Well, that's why I came to you, because my bowels are irritated. You know, the question is, why are they irritated? What's causing it? And I'd like to give you, and I didn't ask you this beforehand, but if it's okay, I'd like to share slides for a few minutes.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And so you'll have to give me permission to do that, I believe.
I am making you host now.
Okay. And I'm giving a presentation this weekend, the third annual Functional Medicine Conference in Rome. And I'm going to show you just a couple of slides from the invitation, or from the presentation. And this is what I'm doing for the doctors in Rome. So it's the same slides, but it's not going to be too geeky. So let me start here. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay. So I want to introduce you to Professor Alessio Fasano. And if you look at his credentials, Professor of Pediatrics, Harvard Medical School, Professor of Nutrition, Harvard School of Public Health, Chief, Pediatric Gastroenterology, Mass General Hospital, Harvard, Director, Mucosal Immunology Center, Harvard, Director, Celiac Research Center, Harvard. I mean, any one of these positions is the lifelong goal for people at the top of their field. I mean, he's got so many because he's such an incredible visionary. We think he's going to get the Nobel Prize because this is the guy, he and his team identified the protein zonulin as the primary protein in causing leaky gut. And they've been researching that for over 20 years now, publishing many, 213 papers as of when I put this slide together on this topic. So a researcher like this, top of the field, is always careful of what he says, always, every word, because he can be misquoted. Look at the title of the paper that he published in January of this year. All disease begins in the leaky gut. The role of zonulin, that's the protein that causes gut permeability in the development of chronic inflammatory diseases. Well, what about irritable bowel syndrome? All disease begins in the gut. What about rheumatoid arthritis? All disease begins in the gut. What about Alzheimer's? All disease begins in the gut. And there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of studies on this, which is why we're talking today about the gut. Now, Professor Fasano tells us that there are 5 components in the development of chronic inflammatory diseases. And every disease is a disease of inflammation, every disease. Think of depression. Just go to Google and type in depression and inflammation. Here come all the studies on it. Depression and anxiety, depression and fatigue, or fatigue and inflammation, right. Fatigue and anxiety, not fatigue, anxiety and inflammation, multiple sclerosis and inflammation, arthritis and inflammation. All diseases are chronic inflammatory diseases when you get a diagnosis. And he's telling us there's 5 pillars in the development of these diseases. He calls it the perfect storm. Now, I love this picture because if you look at this guy, his left knee is bent, his foot's resting on the wall behind him, hands in his pocket, looks really comfortable, in the midst of utter chaos around him. That's what we are living in today. This world that we're living in is utter chaos in terms of the environmental exposures, the pollutants that we're being exposed to that no one in history has ever been exposed to before. No one has an immune system to deal with all of this. That's the chaos around us. Professor Fasano tells us there are 5 pillars in the development of these chronic inflammatory diseases. There's your genetics, there's the environmental triggers that alters the microbiome. That's all the good and bad bacteria in your gut. And when it's altered, it creates this leaky gut thing called intestinal permeability. And then your immune system, trying to protect you, creates all this inflammation in your body, and your symptoms are determined by where your genetics are vulnerable. But this is the big picture. This is the map. You want to get from current health, Chicago, to optimum health, San Diego, you need a map. This is the map. And there's nothing that we can do about the first one, and really the 5th one. You don't want to shut down your immune system. So it's the 3 in the middle that we've got control over, complete control. It's going to take you 6 months or a year to learn how to get control. There's no, just tell me what pill to take. There is no pill to take. If you're suffering, you're down the path already of chronic inflammatory diseases. And so that's like a boulder going downhill. You get sicker, 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 sicker. How do you stop a boulder that's going downhill? You don't. You don't. Well, tell me what pill to take for high blood pressure. You're still going to get dementia, right? You have to understand that when the boulder's going downhill, all you can do is put more dirt down here. So when the boulder comes down there, it's tapered off and you don't get worse and worse. And then you start building up. That you have to change the momentum of where your health is going. You need a map from Chicago to San Diego, from current health to better health. You need a map. All of the rest of this that we've all studied and learned and practiced, for me, 40 years of practice, is like a dog chasing its tail. And we just don't have the time anymore to keep dealing with, let's give the person symptom relief and have them come back when they need us again. That's the message I'm giving this weekend in Italy. You can't do that anymore. If you do that, shame on you. Shame on you, because that person is going to keep going downhill well, the blood pressure might be a little bit better, but the momentum, the inflammation's continuing, and it's going to manifest somewhere else. And the most common manifestation is in the brain right now. So the three in the middle, we have complete control over. And the one that we have the easiest control over is about the environment. How is the environment contributing to inflammation? I'm just going to show you a couple more slides, because today what we're talking about is the next one, the altered microbiome. But I want to show you these slides. Where do you start in reducing environmental triggers? Well, Professor Fasano tells us the two biggest triggers are lipopolysaccharides. That's the exhaust of the bacteria in your gut. 36% of all the small molecules in your bloodstream right now are the exhaust of the bacteria in your gut. They're called the metabolites of the bacteria in your gut. And over 1/3 of everything in your bloodstream is messengers telling the brain how to work, telling the joints how to build new collagen, telling the heart how to pump. The messengers are coming from your gut. We know that for every one message from the brain going down telling the gut what to do, there are 9 messages in the gut going up telling the brain what to do. And it's the exhaust that's doing that in the bloodstream. And they go tell the brain, make this amount of nerve hormones called neurotransmitters. Make these brain hormones in this ratio. And if your gut's out of balance, here comes depression, or here comes anxiety, or here comes schizophrenia. That's why you go on Google and you type in depression and gut bacteria. Here come all the studies, because the technology is so much better now. We know how important the gut is. So the two common triggers are LPS and gluten. Those are the two biggest triggers in the world to triggering this leaky gut. That's the gateway in the development of chronic inflammatory diseases. Now, I know I'm going like this with you, but you're going to listen to this again. You're going to listen to this podcast again with a pencil and paper. Right now, just sit back and take it all in, right? And Dr. Maureen Leonard at Harvard did a review of over 67 studies, I think it was 67 studies on this topic. And she published in the Journal of the American Medical Association. Previous studies have shown that gluten in wheat causes immediate and transient leaky gut. This process takes place in all individuals who ingest gluten. So anyone who's listening to this, if you qualify as an individual, if you're human, and now some ladies don't think their husbands are human, right? But if you're human, this means you. Every person in all individuals, this is from Harvard, you get this transient leaky gut every time you are exposed to wheat. Now, why? Oh, this is for the Italians. Why is this happening? Because, Mrs. Patient, your immune system is the same as your ancestors thousands of years ago. The same. You got the same kidneys, the same gallbladder, the same lungs, the same immune system. And what did our ancestors' immune systems have to protect them from? Bugs, parasites, viruses, mold, fungus, and bacteria. There was no bisphenol A. There was no polysorbate 80, no red dye number 42, no high levels of lead or mercury in the fish. There was none of that. That what our ancestors had to be protected from was bugs, parasites, viruses, mold, fungus, and bacteria. And if they found some food that I know they're hungry, they're searching for food, they find something, they sniff it, taste it, and then they eat it. And if there was really bad bacteria in there, but not enough that they could smell, it's the job of hydrochloric acid in the stomach to kill whatever was on the food. Hydrochloric acid kills everything, but it can sit in your stomach all day. That's the beauty of being human. And one of the jobs of hydrochloric acid was to kill bacteria. But if anything came out of the stomach into the first part of the intestines that was a threat, the immune system sentries standing guard right there are called toll-like receptor 4, TLR4. Their job is to identify if a bug got into the small intestine. It wasn't killed in the stomach, and it got into the small intestine. And then they fire their announcement, and here comes leaky gut. Because the reason for leaky gut is that when your cells open up a little bit, more water comes into the tube of your digestive tract to wash out whatever's not supposed to be there. It's like taking a garden hose to wash off the driveway of some caked on mud, right? That's the purpose of leaky gut. It's a good thing. You just can't have it every day. But what happens is that gluten activates the sentry standing guard. And so toll-like receptor 4 is a sentry standing guard to protect you inside the first part of your intestines. And we'll skip that one, it's too technical. The problem is that gluten is misinterpreted by the leaky gut pathway as a potential harmful component of a microorganism. This is Professor Fasano again. And this happens in all individuals who ingest gluten. Your body thinks it's a bug. And so it activates the inflammation pathway, creating the leaky gut. Now, when that happens again and again and again, now you got a problem. And now it's not transient intestinal permeability anymore. It's permanent intestinal permeability, the leaky gut. And then you got an issue. So Professor Fasano tells us 5 triggers in the development of all chronic diseases. Genetics, can't do anything about that. Environmental triggers, you can do a lot about that. Altered microbiome, that's what we're going to talk about today. Leaky gut, allowing these big molecules to get through the leaky gut into the bloodstream, and then a systemic inflammatory response that occurs wherever your vulnerability is, your brain, your joints, your skin, your emotions, your reproductive system. It just depends on your genetics. So that's the big picture view. That's the map. And when you can explain this to your partner, to your spouse, and you won't be able to do it after listening to this once, so you listen to it a couple of times, and then you talk to your spouse and say, you know, I really want to try and reproduce what I heard here to make sure I understand it. And you're going to mess it up because it's a different language. It's a different way of thinking. But when you've got the map in your head that's accurate, how to get from Chicago to San Diego, when you've got that map, then everything you do in terms of your health is filtered through the lens of, is that getting me closer to San Diego? Is this going to affect one of the 5 pillars? And that's how you approach your health. Whatever your health complaint is, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
Woo!
Take a breath, Dr. O'Brien.
Yeah.
So I guess, you know, with all of that, thank you for that. That's an amazing overview. And one of the questions that's coming up for me is, you mentioned LPS, which you described as this exhaust fume or metabolite from certain bacteria within the gut, and how it can activate the leaky gut pathway, how we've got a lot of it in our blood and that's communicating with us systemically. Yes. Thinking about these sort of 5 bullet points and thinking about the environmental elements of this, and I guess there's a little bit of overlap with the microbiome, the 3rd bullet point. What are some of the things that manipulate the amount of LPS that we have in our guts?
Good question. There are, what manipulates the amount of gram-negative bacteria that produces LPS in your gut is the environment of your gut. Do you have a strong, healthy, diverse microbiome, or do you have one that's way out of balance? It's called dysbiosis. And there's too many bad guys and not enough of the good guys. One way that the bad guys are kept in check is by volume. There's just so many more of the good guys that the bad guys can't get enough food, you know, to flourish. They're threatened all the time. You know, the good guys are weaker than the bad guys, but 10,000 bad guys against 10,000 good guys against 50 bad guys, the bad guys don't have a chance, right? And when you have a diverse microbiome, a healthy, strong, robust, diverse microbiome, you are at small risk of developing elevated levels of LPS. You have to be throwing some gasoline on the fire in your gut that would cause more gram-negative bacteria. For example, and you learn about this in my book, that most people's homes, if they're over 5 years old, their shower heads are loaded with biofilms of bacteria. And every time you get in the shower, you're getting blasted with millions of pathogenic bacteria. So all of those, all of you out there with breathing problems or sinus problems or recurrent sore throats or eyes, inflamed eyes, change your shower head and notice what happens. And then learn how to clean your shower head every 6 months. All of that stuff's in the book, but you just don't think about an environmental trigger like that that is exposing you to so much bad bacteria. But it happens every day. And there are many studies on this, people just don't know it. But the primary mechanism that allows an increase in LPS going systemic is dysbiosis, an abnormal gut microbiome.
Okay. And with that in mind, I guess that sort of lines up the question around what are some of the things that we can do to support a diverse, healthy microbiome so we're keeping some of those bad guys in check?
Funny that you should ask. Oh, you know, you have to have fun doing this. I mean, this is my world now that
Right.
I don't travel anymore because of travel restrictions. And so I'm not on stage as much, and rather I'm on screen that's then projected on stage. We did Lisbon last week, and Rome is this weekend, a couple in the US next week, so you just have to have fun with this once in a while.
Right.
Okay, so how do you rebuild a healthy, diverse microbiome? Step 1, stop throwing gasoline on the fire. What does that mean? It means the most common source of gasoline on the fire is what's on the end of your fork. Well, I don't feel bad when I eat wheat or pizza. It doesn't matter how you feel. The ratio, according to the science, is 8-to-1. For every one person that gets gut symptoms from a food that they're sensitive to, there are 8 people that don't. They get brain symptoms or joint symptoms or skin symptoms. They get acne. I can't tell you how many teenagers with really bad acne, the first thing we do with every single one of them, and maybe 85% of them, it's dramatic, the difference within the first month. Gluten-free, dairy-free, added sugar-free. Get that crap out of there. And because acne, for many, many people, is just a toxic inflammatory reaction to the gasoline you're throwing on the fire. But you don't feel it in your stomach because the ratio is 8-to-1. So you don't know that it's a problem. That's why you have to do the right testing. Our rule is test, don't guess, test. And you can learn about the right testing at my website because there's lots of the vast majority of doctors are using tests. They're 20 years old. And although they're helpful, they're not complete. And so you have to learn what the complete tests are. And that's on our website. We got videos and all that there for you to learn all that.
Okay.
So the first thing is stop throwing gasoline on the fire. You need to find out, what is it that in my life is throwing gasoline on the fire? And once again, the most common source of gasoline is what's on the end of your fork. So that's always where you start. That's number 1. Number 2, if and when you go gluten-free, which is important for most people, some people can get away with it, but very few, maybe 1 out of 20, 1 out of 30. When you do comprehensive testing, they don't have a problem, but that's very few, almost everyone does. But when you go gluten-free, if you do, 80% of the prebiotics in the Western diet. Now, prebiotics are foods that feed the good bacteria in our gut. You've got to feed this bacteria. And Mrs. Patient, you have an entire new body every 7 years. Every cell in your body regenerates, every single cell, except your teeth, every cell. Some cells are really quick, like the lining of your guts every few days. Some cells are really slow, like bone cells, but every cell regenerates. So what's the fuel for the cells in the lining of your gut to reproduce? How do you build new cells, the fastest cells in the body? What's the fuel that they use to build new cells? It's a type of fat. It's called a fatty acid named butyric acid or butyrate. And it's really important. It's the raw material to make new lining to your gut. And when you don't have enough butyric acid or butyrate, same thing, when you don't have enough, you make your house out of straw instead of brick. What does that mean? Well, just Google butyric acid, B-U-T-Y-R-I-C, butyric acid, and colon cancer. Here come all the studies. Low butyric acid, high risk of colon cancer. Because you made your house out of straw instead of brick. You're going to make new cells. And if you don't have enough of the raw material to make healthy, strong cells, you'll use whatever fats you've got. And you make abnormal cells and you're much higher risk of colon cancer. Okay, so butyric acid is really important. Where do I get butyric acid? $1 million question. Really good question. Where do you get butyric acid? It's the action of the good bacteria in your gut on vegetable fiber. And so your bacteria chews up the vegetable fiber and its exhaust is butyric acid, which is then used to make new healthy cells in your gut. So you must have enough butyric acid. That means you need enough vegetable fiber. And when you go on a gluten-free diet, which is a really good thing to do for most people, 80% of the prebiotic in the Western diet comes from wheat. So now if you go wheat-free, all of a sudden you feel better overall. You know, your energy's up, you lose weight, you might lose 10, 15 pounds in a month to 2 months without trying. Sorry, I've got something in my eye here. Without trying, you feel great, your symptoms are going down. But 6 months later, you start getting sick with something else. Why? Because you went gluten-free and you're eating the gluten-free foods that are just crap. There is no nutrient value in those foods. There is no fiber in those foods. So you're starving your good bacteria in your gut, the predominant bacteria, and they die off, die off, die off. Now here come more of the bad guys because there's not as many of the good guys. So when you go on a gluten-free diet, all that is set up for what I'm about to tell you. When you go on a gluten-free diet, you must eat fiber-rich foods. What does that mean? Mrs. Patient, when you go shopping for food, always buy organic if you can, really important. And buy a couple of every root vegetable in the store. Buy carrots, radishes, turnips, parsnips, rutabaga, sweet potatoes. Not too many white potatoes because they alter your blood sugar if you eat too many, but every root vegetable they've got in the store. And every day you eat one root vegetable. Well, I don't know how to cook with turnips. Well, neither do I. And what I do is I just dice them up. I slice an onion, I peel some garlic, I put in a little avocado oil or olive oil, saute it all together in there, put a little sauce on it, and I eat it. Well, what about rutabaga? I dice it up, slice some onion, peel some garlic, saute it all up together with a little avocado oil or olive oil, add a little peanut sauce or something to it, and I eat it. You don't have to be Julia Child here. You don't have to make exotic dishes. And we've all been in restaurants where they do something fancy. They take radishes and they shave them and put them on a salad. That's raw root vegetable, right? And carrots, you can shave carrots. That's raw root vegetable. And every day you have one root vegetable and you alternate them. You don't eat carrots every day because every root vegetable has different kinds of fiber that feed different bacteria in your gut. Next part of number 2, 1 root vegetable a day is part 1. Part 2, go on Google and type in list of prebiotic foods. Print out the list, put it on your refrigerator, and you eat 2 from the list every day. So it's 1 root vegetable and 2 from the list every day. You're going to learn a banana is a prebiotic. Onions are a prebiotic. Garlic is a prebiotic. You don't have to eat weird food like chicory. I mean, chicory's good, but you don't have to eat these weird things you've never heard of before. You just need to expand your horizons a little bit with some direction. You need a map when you're rebuilding a microbiome. That's number 2. Number 3, have a cup of bone broth every day, because bone broth is high in gelatin tannate. Gelatin tannate is like a seal. It's like a mucus lining on the inside of your gut when you drink bone broth. You know, if you ever like put bone broth, if you make a chicken soup and you put it in the refrigerator, the next day there's this thick gel on the top of the chicken soup. That's gelatin tannate. And you heat it up and you drink it, you know, and the gelatin tannate's like a seal for your damaged gut. So it allows your gut to heal a little bit, it reduces the inflammation, and it turns on the genes to help it heal quicker. So you have a little bone broth every day. That's number 3. Number 4, when you go shopping, buy 5 different types of fermented vegetables. Sauerkraut, kimchi, miso, fermented beets, curry flavored, whatever you like. But get 5 different types, just make sure they're not pasteurized, and you eat a forkful every day, just 1 forkful, because you're increasing the inoculation of good bacteria into your gut. And just by doing this, you increase the amount of bacteria in your diet by 10,000-fold. Not double, not triple, not 10 times, not 100 times, not 1,000 times, 10,000-fold. Just by a forkful every day, and alternate them, because every vegetable, when it's fermenting, produces different families of good bacteria. So you don't want to just eat sauerkraut every day. Sauerkraut's good for you. Germans got famous for eating sauerkraut, but the Koreans are famous for kimchi. And kimchi, there are many different flavors that you make with kimchi, right? How often do you see obese Koreans from Korea? It doesn't happen very often at all. It's because their microbiome is a healthy, diverse microbiome that balances the amount of calories that their body uses. There's a whole microbiome for obese people that has to change. They've got good guys, and they've got too many of the good guys that hoard calories. And so you have to change that. You have to get more balance. That's why the word I use is diversity. You need a diversity of the microbiome, not just a whole lot of one type. You need the diversity of a healthy microbiome. So that's number 4, is the fermented vegetables. Number 5, Mrs. Patient, when you go shopping for food, buy a bunch of apples, organic always. And when you go home, wash them off, and then don't peel them, slice them up, throw the seeds away, put them in a pot, and if the pot is this high in apples, add water about 1/3 to the height of the apples in the pot. Throw a little cinnamon in there, maybe a couple of raisins for your kids if they like it. Turn it on high, leave it on 10, 12 minutes, something like that. Look in the pot. When you see a shine on the skin of the apples, it's done. You made applesauce. In England, they call it stewed apples, right? But you made applesauce. The pectin and the shine on the skin of the apples is the pectin that's been released from the meat and the underside of the skin. So it's right out on the surface of the applesauce now. So when you eat it, it's available in the small intestine. The pectin in apples increases the most important enzyme in your gut called intestinal alkaline phosphatase, IAP. IAP does so much for you. It reduces the amount of LPS that gets in your bloodstream by 73%. It lowers cholesterol, it lowers triglyceride, it stabilizes blood sugar, it feeds the good bacteria so they propagate. It helps the good bacteria dock onto the walls of your intestines. It's an antibacterial for the bad bacteria. IAP is your friend. And you have a tablespoon of applesauce, homemade, every day. This is why an apple a day keeps the doctor away. This is where it comes from. It works. But you can't just eat an apple and think that you're going to be healthy now. No, it's one of the little things you do on a daily basis that feeds making a healthier, diverse microbiome, which is one of the 3 pillars in the development of chronic inflammatory disease. You want to get from Chicago to San Diego? You want to get from rheumatoid arthritis to symptom-free and healthy and vibrant? This is where you start for every person, every time, because there are 5 pillars, and you address these 3 pillars in the middle. And the easiest one to start with is the environmental triggers, do a proper test for wheat sensitivity, and then rebuild the microbiome, which automatically calms down the intestinal permeability. Sometimes you need to take the supplements to help with permeability because it's so damaged, which then reduces the leaky gut so you don't get the systemic inflammation response.
Beautiful.
That's the PhD program to rebuild a healthy gut. And that's what I'm teaching these docs this weekend in Italy. Amazing. In everyday language. I'm giving it to you in everyday language.
Yeah, no, thank you, Dr. Brian. That's fantastic. I think you've covered everything really that I wanted to today. I do have one question that's going back towards the beginning of the conversation, just to see if there's anything that you'd like to add to it around sort of the environmental side of things. And obviously we've spoken a lot about gluten. We spoke about LPS from Dr. Fasano's paper. Are there any other sort of common environmental triggers that we might want to be mindful of here as well?
Oh my goodness. Oh. Read my book. This book is all about that this is the problem in our world today. From 2013 to 2017, there was a 373% increase in diagnosed Alzheimer's in the US in people between the age of 40 and 54.
Wow.
373% increase in 4 years. And the best statistic I could find for Italy is between 2005 and 2015, it was double the diagnosis of Alzheimer's in 10 years. That we have a huge problem right now, and people don't know this, because I'll show you one more slide. Okay, since you asked, I'll show you one more slide here. Let me see if I can find it here. Hold on 1 minute.
Sure.
Let's see where it is. One moment while I'm looking.
No, don't worry, not a problem. Thank you for sharing.
Okay. Okay, it's not there. Let's see, where is it? Oh, it's in the other presentation. That's why I couldn't find, because I'm doing 2 presentations for this conference in Italy. So let's bring up the other one. I want to give you guys, I'm going to bum you out. I'm really going to cause distress for you, but this is a wake-up call. This is a wake-up call that's so critically important. So we'll do this and then we'll end it for the day, because we will overwhelm them to a major degree. So I'm going to share screen again. Here we go. And let's put this on the screen. Okay, so the brain is your canary in the coal mine. And for those that are not familiar with that concept, the brain is, the canary in the coal mine is an advanced warning of some danger. The metaphor originated from the times when miners used to carry caged canaries while at work, and they listened to the canaries sing all day down there in the coal pits, in the coal mines. If there was any methane or carbon monoxide in the mine, the canary would drop over and die very quickly. It's highly sensitive to that before the levels of the gas reached those hazards to humans. So when they didn't hear the canary singing anymore, the alarms went off and everybody got out of there real quick. That's a canary in the coal mine. The brain is a canary in the coal mine for what's going on in our bodies today. What do I mean by that? Well, let's take a look here. So this came out from these Alzheimer's Association, that this is the increase in Alzheimer's that's occurring right now overall. You see those, the direction of this statistic. 1 out of 3 seniors dies with Alzheimer's or another dementia now in the US. That means between you and I and you, the listener, one of the 3 of us is going down with Alzheimer's. That's how common it is now. Blue Cross Blue Shield is the largest insurance organization in the United States, billion-dollar industry, and they just published this report this year that shows us the increase in the, from the age of 30 to 64, the increase in Alzheimer's in 4 years, from the age of 30 to 64. And when you break it down by age brackets, look at these numbers of how it's increasing in 4 years. The last 4 years, this report was just published. It took them 2 years to get all the information together to publish the report. This is you, the listener. This is what's happening right now. And in Italy, 40% of the people with dementia don't get a diagnosis. So the numbers are skewed. The numbers are not accurate, but this is between 2005 and 2015. It's more than doubled. So that's what we're up against right now. Women get Alzheimer's, men get vascular dementia. They look very similar to the naked eye. And that's geeky stuff. But why is this happening? Well, there's a slide that I want to show you, but it looks like it's further down here. I don't want to go through all of this really geeky stuff for you. Here's the slide. Took me over an hour to make this slide, this one slide. I'm really proud of it. So what happens in our brain, once again, chronic inflammatory diseases. We're looking at inflammatory diseases. What happens in the brain? Well, you have a normal level of antibodies because you rebuild new cells all the time. So your body makes antibodies to get rid of the old and damaged cells. That's okay. But then you get inflammation. It starts when you're 2 years old, 22 years old, 92 years old. But when it starts, and it comes from food sensitivities and bacterial infections, environmental exposures, EMF pollution, emotional stress, structural stress, but now you get inflammation. And now you are starting to get some damage in your brain cells. You get some elevated antibodies to your brain, but you don't feel any of this. You've got no symptoms whatsoever. And this can go on for 20 years. We know that Alzheimer's is a decades-long disease. You don't get Alzheimer's a month before you're diagnosed. It's been going on for 20 plus years. And we know that now, and we know the mechanisms that are at play here that cause it. But now, after 20 years or so of being in this, what's called the prodromal stage, you have no symptoms. Now you're starting to say, well, where are my keys? I don't remember where I put my keys. Where did I park my car? In the parking lot at the shopping center. Oh, that person walking toward, what's their name? What's their name? Oh, I know them. What's their name? And you just can't access. This is called short-term memory loss, mild cognitive impairment, and you start to lose your sense of smell in this stage. Next, as more brain cells are being killed off because the inflammation continues, the 5 pillars, right? And so you keep throwing gasoline on the fire because you don't know it's gasoline on the fire, and your genetic vulnerabilities in your brain, you have more antibodies to your brain causing more inflammation, killing off more brain cells, killing off more brain cells. You go into mild Alzheimer's. Now you get the diagnosis, and now you're panicking, looking for the drug for your father that's going to get rid of these symptoms. There is no drug. There will never be a drug for this. Stop dreaming that way. And we hear all these government things are allocating billions of dollars for the new research for the drugs for Alzheimer's. Pharmaceutical companies have shut down their Alzheimer's research departments and laid off all the scientists. They've spent billions, and they realize they're never going to find a pill to fix this. So they're investing in other areas of healthcare that's more profitable. They're businesses. They're designed as a business. There will never be a pill for Alzheimer's or for Parkinson's. Come on. How can there be? Because this mechanism's been going on for 20 to 30 years. Now you get moderate Alzheimer's. Now you make poor judgment. You're impulsive. You got a short attention span. And then unfortunately, it's the severe stage. But this is the mechanism that's going on, that goes on for 20, 30 years before you ever have a sense of my brain's on fire. What's going on here? There are tests in the United States now called the Neural Zoomer Plus, because you zoom in on the problem. And it looks at 48 antibodies to your brain. We haven't had one come back normal. The brain is the canary in the coal mine. We're all being exposed to so many toxic chemicals every single day of our lives that the inflammation is manifesting in our brains. That's why autism has gone through the roof. That's why Alzheimer's is going through the roof. That's why Parkinson's is going through the roof. Our brains are on fire and we don't know how to take care of them. That's why you need to read this book, because it gives you all the little pearls of the things where you need to ask questions in your life. And that's why you have to understand the map from Chicago to San Diego requires you to learn the three in the middle. What are the environmental triggers? How's it altering my microbiome? How do I rebuild a healthy microbiome? And how do I reduce intestinal permeability? And when you do that, a year, 2 years later, you do the brain antibody test again. Now you're normal. Or if you had 18 out of 48 elevated, which we see all the time, 2 years later, we do it again. Now you've got 2 out of 18 elevated, right? So you're on the right track. You're slowing this thing down. You've reduced that inflammation dramatically. It's the only way you ever have a chance. I'm sorry to be so blunt, but you've got, well, no, there's good evidence. Science says that taking N-acetylcysteine is going to help reduce glutathione levels that'll reduce the toxins in your brain. Show me where the inflammation is reduced in your brain from doing that. Now, there's no question N-acetylcysteine, I take it myself. I mean, it's really a good thing, but you have to understand how to read the map to get from Chicago to San Diego. It's the 5 pillars.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Dr. O'Brien. Just to say, we will put links to your books wherever we can. So on our website and on our YouTube page where the video will be, etc. So people will be able to find it on those resources as well.
Thank you, Alex. And my staff put something together for all of your viewers. And see if I can bring it up here. My iPhone fingerprint thing is not working right now. Try it again. And let's see if it's going to open up for me. It's not opening. Come on, why is it not opening up here? There we go. Let's go here, 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 here. And yeah, it's the dr.com. Our website is thedoctor.com. Just don't spell the word doctor out. The dr.com/rebalance. balance, rebalance. And lots of handouts for you on your microbiome and fixing your gut. So you've got some guidelines on how to do all of this.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Dr. Brian. I know everyone's going to really appreciate being able to listen to your brain. So it's been a really helpful episode. And I'm sure we're going to get some great feedback.
Thanks for what you're doing out there. You know, it's only by waking up your generation, especially when you guys wake up to this. And see, I want everybody to be skeptical. I want everybody to be skeptical. What does that mean? Skepticism says, I'm not sure I buy that, but I'm going to look into it. It makes sense, so I'll look into it. Cynicism is, I don't buy it. That's a bunch of hogwash. I'm not wasting my time with it. You have cynicism, see on down the road, maybe. You have skepticism, you look into this, you're going to be blown away, and you will convert to understand it's the only way to protect you and your family in this crazy toxic world we live in. And with that, I'll say thank you so very much.
Thank you, Dr. Brian.